Hello and welcome. My name is GuruPathik's, and today I'm going to be talking about playing from behind, what you should be doing, what you should be thinking, and how you can turn games around. This was actually a game that I played a couple of days ago, and I feel like it's a really good replay that illustrates how to play from behind. So we're kind of just going to go through this replay, and we'll talk about pertinent points as we get to them. What you're going to notice from this replay is we were very far behind early. It is 13 minutes on the clock, and we are 7.5k net worth behind, basically 7k net worth. If you're thinking in terms of just raw win rates, what that kind of net worth disadvantage usually equates to, it's usually around 10% when you're that far behind early that you win a game like this. So first thing I want to talk about when playing from behind is do not give up. That is one of the biggest things about playing from behind that I think a lot of people struggle with, is that they give up very easily. And if you give up, you're going to lose, right? Sitting in your base, doing nothing, trying not to have an impact on the game, you know, while it may seem fruitless and it may seem like this game is impossible to win, and this game is an example of a game that, you know, is, in that 10% category, so very unlikely, but it is possible. And so what you're going to see here is we're going to get a couple of kills across the map, right? I'm going to be killing this Omni Knight in the bottom lane because he's pushing really aggressively because he feels like his team is owning, and then I end up also catching out a Pugna here in the bottom river. And why am I showing you this point? The reason I'm showing you this point is that we got a couple of kills here, but if you were paying attention to the mini-map, there were a couple of kills that happened on the top lane as well. So we're going to go watch those. They're right here. And what ends up happening here is just kind of a small skirmish with Lone Druid and Oracle versus OD. You've got Timbersaw, who's also here as well. And they end up getting a couple of kills on these guys with a flanking Nyx. And I'll put this sped up a little bit, because the point I want to show you is that in addition to us essentially team wiping them, we killed 4 of their heroes across the map, and then we also took this tower. What you're going to notice is that 7.5k net worth advantage is essentially gone. Like, if I pause the game and we look at it, you can see how drastically the net worth graph swings when something bad happens. Like, they got 4 deaths, which isn't a lot, and they lost a tower, and they essentially lost 2/3 of their advantage. Like, Dota used to be a game that the gold income was kind of a fixed thing, and so coming back was a lot more difficult. And I think in previous patches, you know, back in the 6.67 era, like, there were points where it was actually impossible for you to come back. But the way net worth works now, if you win 2 big team fights, that's essentially pulling the game back even. And that's something you got to keep in mind when you're playing from behind, is that it's only 1 team fight worth of mistakes in terms of evening a game out. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump to the 16-minute mark, and then I'm going to talk about their lineup. And the reason I want to talk about their lineup is that it's important to understanding what you do when you play from behind. Like, if we look at their lineup, they have an OD who's an extremely scary hero to team fight against, mostly because he's got Sanity's Eclipse. He can do a lot of damage very fast. They also have an Omni Knight who's likely going to be repelling the OD, which makes him a really difficult target to go on, especially because we're heavy magical damage. Like, there's not much physical damage on our team. And Omni's extremele difficult to play against because he shows up at your base at 23 minutes and is like, stop me from killing your base. That's very much his playstyle. They also have a Phoenix who is very hard to play against because of the sun, like very hard to team fight into. Same thing with Pugna. Pugna's very hard to team fight into. And then Oracle can save any one of their heroes. So what they have is 2 healing supports. They've got, you know, a really good pusher, a really good damage dealer, carry, and then AoE team fight disable. But what this team fight lacks is this team lacks catch. And the term is called catch, but basically what catch is when somebody is pushing or farming alone, your person with catch is able to, quote-unquote, catch them, hence why it's called that. But they blink onto a target, they disable them for long enough that the rest of the heroes on your team are able to do damage to kill them. You know, these heroes are very much blink initiator type heroes, you know, the like blink Slardars, the blink Centaurs, those kinds of heroes of the world. And then if you look at our lineup, we really lack a lot of team fight. Slark's not a very good team fighter. Nyx is not a very good team fighter. Lone Druid's not a very good team fighter. Like, Timbersaw's pretty good. He does a lot of damage, but he doesn't necessarily, have a lot of control. And then Arc Warden is, king of split pushing. So, not exactly the best lineup. And the reason I want to show you this clip is this is kind of a microcosm of what happens when you fight into teams that have better team fight than you. Right? I decide to go on this OD. He gets healed, hits me twice, ults, and I die. Like, I need a lot of items to deal with that. I need, like a Diffusal to get rid of the Omni charges. I need BKB to be able to deal with the OD ult, and I don't want him stealing intelligence and doing that much damage to me. Like, it's a very difficult situation to fight into him. And this fight, like, is a pretty even fight, honestly. Arc Warden's not there, but it's basically a 4v4. Because Oracle's not there as well, so it's kind of without the 5 positions, and you can see how easily we get run over in that team fight. And so what you have to learn when you're playing behind is that fighting into them usually isn't the answer, because you can't, right? They're at such a net worth advantage that it's very difficult to do. This is kind of like a side point that I want to bring up, but this Oracle is farming the bottom lane. When you're farming alone like this against a team that has gankers, Nyxes and Slarks with Shadow Blades and these kind of things, when you're farming alone, what you need to do is you need to keep in mind what the map looks like, especially when enemy heroes are respawning. So this, like, Slark is respawning, for instance, and if you look at the map as to what Slark would see, Slark sees no one top, he sees no one mid, and he sees an Oracle farming by himself in the bottom lane. This Oracle should back immediately, because what's likely to happen is this Slark is likely to TP bottom to try and kill this Oracle, right? That's what makes sense. But he's not thinking about the game. He's thinking about getting a little extra gold. He's trying to finish, his Aether Lens, whatever he's trying to think about. He's not considering the game. And this ends up being kind of a free kill. This is just something to think about when you're split pushing, or just playing Dota in general, is when heroes respawn, what do they see on the map? Because if you're thinking about that, then you'll understand where you're vulnerable to being ganked. Unlike this Oracle. That's like a small side point. So next thing I'm going to go to is I'm going to go to basically the crux of this replay, which is at 27 minutes. So at this stage of the game, if we're looking at net worth, we are 7,500 behind, which doesn't look like as bad of a deficit because, we're 21 minutes into the game now. But what you'll notice sort of about our items on our team is we have a Lone Druid, right, where is this bear? Who went Midas. So we've sunk 2k gold into an item that essentially does nothing. And then we have an Arc Warden who also has a Midas. So another 2k gold sunk into an item that really does nothing to help us team fight. So if we're looking at this gold disadvantage, it's really something around like 12k, I would say, at 21 minutes, which again puts us at that 10% win rate. And then the next biggest thing that happens in this instance is they pick up an Aegis. And, this is the time where you're most vulnerable to losing the game. They show up, they've got an Aegis, and they're basically going to knock on your front door and try to kill you. And if we're looking at these items, this OD is massive. He went Midas, he's got BKB and a Force Staff. Very, very hard to deal with. They've got a Mechon Omni who's going to be pushing and supporting this OD like crazy. Oracle's got all of his items up. He's got a Ghost Scepter. He's really difficult to kill for us. Also saves all of his teammates. Pugna, he's got some items on the Courier, but he went kind of like a Dagon Aether Lens build, which actually killed me a few times because it does so much damage. I didn't realize it. But he's got items on the Courier. So he's got 2 more recipes of Dagon. And then, Phoenix is level 11, got level 2 ulti. He doesn't have a lot of farm, but he has a lot of farm, but he just hasn't spent it. I don't know what he ends up buying this game, to be honest. But you can see, their team fight is exceptionally scary. And I think a lot of players at this stage of the game would look to the scoreboard and be like, well, how did we get in this shitty situation? Well, it's obvious that my 0-5 and 0-6 supports are the reason we're losing this game. Time to talk into all chat and be like, GG, noob supports, and mid, right? That's the logical thing to do. No, these guys are trying, right? Don't flame your supports. Coming back from a deficit is not a solo thing. You can't do it by yourself. And if you just flame the shit out of your teammates, what's going to happen is they're going to be like, okay, I'm just going to go AFK at the fountain. Like, people are very prone to giving up when you give them a lot of negativity. So don't do that, right? Instead, focus on what you can do, right? And I'm going to talk about the 3 main things you want to do when you're defending against a team that is trying to high ground you. And we're going to demonstrate them with principles. So, first thing, the idea with defending is, or playing against teams that have better team fight and playing from behind, is you want to force rotations back. The way you do this is by pressuring towers. So in this example, I am pressuring this top tower, which forces 2 heroes back. And so what we've essentially done is we've created a 30-second window where maybe we can take a fight with numbers, right? And so after causing this rotation, I instantly run mid and I go on this Oracle because I know that there are 2 heroes who can't possibly be there. OD imprisons the guy, and I end up having to waste my ult, and so we don't end up getting anything done. But the idea is very simple. You split push to split them up, and then you take small skirmishes rather than trying to fight 5v5 into a team that's stronger than you. Now, this is sort of how you deal with these teams that are trying to high ground, because the way you deal with them isn't necessarily by AFKing, sitting in your base, waiting for them to end the game kind of thing or make a mistake. Like, playing from behind is a very active process, and what you're going to see is that it takes a lot of coordination too. So first thing that's going to happen is somebody needs to defend the push, and that's what Timbersaw is doing. So if we're checking out what Timbersaw is doing, Timbersaw is back. He is the best AoE clear on our team, right? Chakram is extremely difficult to push into, and this is kind of the role that he's going to fill in this game. Every single time they're going to push, Timbersaw is going to be back, he's going to be in position, and he's going to be defending the push, right? That is his role in this game, right? Then and then we'll just kind of check it out. His goal is just to kill this creep wave, not die. Now that's a little tricky and sometimes can be very difficult, but you can see he does a nice job, and he kills off this creep wave. Now, the other roles in this sort of defending from behind is the split pushers, and that's the role that this LD is going to be playing. LD is constantly in another lane pushing, and you know, LD is a very good split pusher, and so you're like, of course LD is split pushing. But what you'll also notice is that in the bottom lane, Arc Warden is split pushing. Now, Arc Warden doesn't really contribute anything to de-pushing, and he's trying to contribute to the game in some way, shape, or form. And so what he is doing is split pushing. So you need someone to defend the push with an AoE clear, right? And that is usually something that is very hero dependent. That's not necessarily something that, you know, like a lone druid can't do that very well, but certain heroes can. What you're also going to see is that, okay, so those are kind of 2 main roles. Then the last role I'm going to talk about is the wave cutting role. And the wave cutting role is probably the most overlooked aspect, but is also one of the most difficult ones to do. And this also kind of fits a specific hero role in that it's usually reserved for the highest mobility hero on your team who's good at getting solo pickoffs. So in this game, it's going to be me, which is the Slark. And what you're going to see is that these guys are pushing mid. And so instead of sitting behind my tower and waiting for a team fight, I go around the wave and I end up looking for the creep wave behind them. Now, the main reason for this is I'm trying to stop the push by not allowing creep waves to come up. Here I end up getting kind of a free pick on Pugna because he's kind of separated from his team, so that works out really nicely for our team. But this is creep cutting, and the goal with creep cutting is you're playing around backdoor protection. So if we look at sort of what they're looking at in their terms of their base, they're trying to hit this tower, and it's taking a little bit of damage, but they have no creep wave that's going to come, which means that backdoor protection is going to kick in on this tower, and they're not going to be able to do anything in terms of pushing it, because they've got a Slark sitting here, cutting all of their creep wave that they really can't catch up to or deal with. They've got a lone druid who's pressuring the top lane. They've got an oracle who's pressuring the bottom lane. Do you see how much lane pressure there is? Like, they're playing on our half of the map and we're playing on their half of the map, right? Don't get cornered. Get out on the map and do things. And This is risky. It's scary a lot of the time. You know, you're at risk of dying. But when you're playing from behind, you've got to take these kinds of risks. Otherwise, there's no way you're going to win. And what ends up happening is these guys realize, well, I guess we can't push anymore. Right? We have no creep wave. We can't go into backdoor protection. There's no way. We're just going to sit here. Even though our team fight is amazing, I guess we have to back and deal with this lone druid. We have to back and deal with the split pushing Arc Warden and deal with this split pushing Slark. And then again, what have we caused? We've caused them to split up, which means that the heroes with high mobility and pick-off potential, you know, the Nyxes and the Slarks of the world, they look for kills. And you know, that guy was TPing away and the odds of me getting a kill were really low. But if he TPs into a lane to try and kill my lone druid, maybe he shows up at half HP, and that means that we have a better chance of getting a kill. So I sometimes just hit people who are TPing away. Sometimes they pick a bad TP location and you could actually get a kill on them before they complete their TP, because they have a 5-second TP rather than a 3-second. It's a little bit tricky. But you can see, they're grouping up again. They're trying to push bottom. But you can see, looking at the minimap, they're split up. There's 2 bottom, there's 2 mid. And that's the biggest thing to focus on right now. I end up buying a diffusal here, which means that they're not going to be grouped up, especially if we see someone off by themselves. And so that means the next 20 to 30 seconds are kind of a good window for pick-offs. And so what ends up happening is I see this Omni sort of dilly-daddling around in the river, and I get a really nicely timed delivery of my diffusal blade, which allows me to casually misuse diffusal blade a couple of times. I end up having to diffuse off a haste rune, and then I end up having to diffuse again to get rid of his ultimate. So I use 3 diffusal charges basically within the first 10 seconds of getting it, but I end up getting a kill anyway. And that's really good. Like, what you're going to see is that these teams that team fight and they 5-man and they do all these things, they aren't always on the same page and they aren't always together. And the distance between them, you know, like I've gotten 2 pickoffs right now. I've gotten 1 pickoff on the Pugna, where if we were looking at the minimap, right, they were all sitting right here, and Pugna was right here. Like, this is too far of a distance for them to support their Pugna. And I think a lot of people would assume that this is 5-man and we can't actually get kills there. You can. Like, distances make a difference. Again, Omni was right here, his whole team was right here. And instead of trying to react, they just left him because they wanted to take this tower. And again, what you're going to see is that people assemble in the roles that they're supposed to be. Timber shows up to defend the push. He's throwing out his chakram. Where is Slark? Slark is split pushing the wave. Where is Lone Druid? Lone Druid is split pushing mid. Right? Everyone is anticipating what's going to happen. Right? The biggest thing when you're defending your base is not like, they're at our base, I guess we should do these things. It's the 30 to 40 seconds beforehand that really matter, right? Because they've telegraphed what's going on. So I'm going to go back in the replay and show you sort of what's happening, right? At this point, right, they have 2 of their heroes grouped up bottom, like I said, and they have 2 of their heroes sort of grouped up mid, and I said it was a good time to sort of look to push. But what's going to happen is they're telegraphing what their next minute or so is going to look like. Pushing lineups are very direct in what they want to do. And when you see 2 pushers pushing down a tower bottom, right, they're going to push that lane, right? You can see that that's going to happen. And so at this point, you need to be getting into position to defend the split push, right? If you wait until they're at your base, it is too late, right? Lone Druid at this point recognizes that they've committed themselves to a push bottom. 3 heroes have shown bottom. So what does Lone Druid do? He immediately shows up into the middle lane and starts to push, right? He is anticipating that these guys want to go high ground. I am in a position where thought I was split pushing, but actually now I need to be in a position where I'm cutting the wave. And I get kind of lucky here running into the Omni. That's not necessarily like, this is more bad play by Omni than it is good play by me. Especially with the diffusal charges. Man, that was terrible. But what I'm really wanting to do is I'm really wanting to get to that creep wave. And, you know, this is a little bit tricky when you think about creep waves, right? Where is the dire creep wave right now, right? Where is it in the lane? There's a dire creep wave somewhere in here, right? But where is it? There are 2 main ways to do this. And I think, you know, these are just kind of like general rules of thumb. I don't actually know like where the creep wave is at every single second in Dota. That would be a ridiculous thing to try and memorize. But what isn't a ridiculous thing to memorize is that creeps spawn every 30 seconds, right? And they tend to reach the midpoint or the river at 30 seconds. So usually this corner of the map, that's where the creep wave will be at 30 seconds. This corner of the map, that's where the creep wave will be at 30 seconds. The middle of the map, that's where the creep wave will be at 30 seconds. It's a little bit off, but in general, that's about a good estimate. The other thing you can do is you can use the other creeps on the map, right? So if I look at my top lane, for example, right here, see how my creeps are right here at this tier 2? What's really nice about using your own creep wave is that the map will mirror itself every time. So if my creeps are at the tier 2 here, these creeps are 100% at the tier 2 here, right? That's another way to know where the creep wave is. Use your own creep wave. Now, that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes you're going to have a creep wave that gets kind of stuck by a dire creep wave pushing into here, and so you don't have the perfect mirror image on both sides. And so that's why you need the two different ways of being able to tell where the creep wave is, right? The time, so that when your creep wave is stuck here and you don't have a mirror, you can't use this, and then when you do, you can use the mirror and be much more accurate about it. But you can see I get into position and I split push, and or not split push, I cut the wave. And the goal of this is that, you know, we want to be in a position where we take a fight that's like 3v2, 4v2, you know, 5v3. We want a numbers advantage because there's no way for us to fight into this, you know, repel Aegis BKB Omni or OD who's just going to destroy our team, right? And our defenders are doing as best they can, stalling as best they can. And so the fourth role I want to talk about, because it hasn't really been that relevant yet, is sort of this Nyx's role. And this is usually true of anyone who has a disable. But when you're forcing pressure, sort of like this Lone Druid is, this Lone Druid is pressuring the base. He's hitting the tier 3 towers, which means that they need to get back and defend immediately. Timbersaw's done his job. He's tried to kill this creep wave. You know, he's died for it. Arc Warden was trying to help him out. But now this Nyx's role becomes super important, and that becomes canceling of TPs, right? I'm in a position where I have basically cut both of the creep waves, so there's no creep wave that's going to join them for 45 seconds, and Nyx sneaks in at the very end and sees these guys who are like, oh boy, our base is dying, and what does he do? Cancels Pugna's TP. Now, he doesn't end up getting the OT TP, and if he got the OD TP too, then that would have been like probably a game-winning play, because they have no ability to defend our Lone Druid, and he probably would have taken 2 lanes of racks. But what ends up happening is because he catches the Pugna, he even dies for it. It's not a huge deal that he dies, but like I'm able to get 2 kills here in the bottom lane. And what that also means is that our Lone Druid, this whole time, instead of having to fight 3 or 4 heroes, it's basically only OD and the heroes that just respawn from dying bottom, which means that critically, OD ends up getting a lane of racks here. The goal when you're behind, the biggest goal when you're behind, is to you want to choose the fights, and you want to force them to choose bad fights, right? And the way you do that is by cutting the wave, canceling TPs with stuns, right? Split pushing with other heroes, and then clearing the creep wave without dying. Those are the 4 main aspects of playing from behind. And then what you'll see on the gold graph are things that look like this. We were 7.5k behind. Now the game's, you know, it's pulling back a little bit more even, right? It's all about playing smart, picking the right fights, doing the right things. And then what you'll see is that, you know, we've kind of been really tipsy-turvy this game. But we'll sort of keep going. And we'll watch a little bit more from my perspective. But in that time, essentially in that, you know, 5 to 6 minutes, where I didn't have a diffusal, I didn't have a BKB, I didn't have the items I needed to fight, I wasn't ready. But see, here again, they telegraph that they're pushing mid. Where am I? I'm cutting the wave, constantly anticipating, and we've essentially wasted an Aegis, right? OD has been sitting here like, I want to fight, I've got Aegis, and he essentially wasted it. And we have this timer written down And Timbersaw actually calls that the Aegis is down, we should fight them. And so we choose to take a fight with me having my items up. I didn't end up having my BKB delivered. Otherwise, this would have been a really good fight. But choosing the right fights. OD ends up BKBing, they use Sun. I'm not able to fight anymore. I kind of just leave my teammates rather than continuing to fight a bad fight. Because if I die at this point, there's a good chance that we lose. But I don't end up dying. I have buyback, so I'm okay. But you can see, like, we're fighting, and it's not necessarily a full team fight because Lone Druid is in the top lane and he's pushing, right? Exerting that pressure. And my teammates have died, but I'm going to be sitting here and sort of trying to defend the base on my own, which is a possible thing to do because I have buyback. And I just kind of like run at them. You know, this guy's off by himself. Ends up using his spells nicely, and I use my spells pretty poorly. So that's part of the reason why I don't kill him. But I'm just trying to stall at this point. You know, they sent one back. They actually sent the Lone Druid back to defend, or the OD back to defend the Lone Druid, right? Because he's worried about this Lone Druid pushing. And that essentially ends up being a call to go. Now, go, right? It's just me. Right? 3 of my heroes are dead, right? So why is this a good situation to go and fight? It's because these guys are going to respawn. Arc Warden's going to respawn, Nyx is going to respawn, which means that they're both instantly going to TP bottom, and we're going to fight here. So I just kind of go, understanding that my team will be behind me in 4 to 5 seconds, right? It's not a perfect initiation by any means. A Slark going in first and then casually taking a dig into the face before BKBing isn't exactly the best initiation of all time. But it's the idea that's good. It's they're without their strongest hero, we should fight them in the bottom lane. And our whole team assembles, right? Lone Druid's here, Nyx is here, and again, 5v4 fight without them having their mid. Right? Their mid is just, essentially their carry player is just farming mid like, guys, I used my TP, I can't help you. You know, and he's got all these items, he just finished a Hex, like, but it doesn't matter because he's not there. Right? It's a positioning battle. And, you know, I think playing from behind is one of the most difficult aspects of Dota 2, because it is so hard to win those kinds of games. But I think what you'll find is that if you don't give up and you constantly try, you'll learn to sort of manage the risk rewards. And I think most games aren't necessarily going to turn out like this, where you're able to recover a game and fight these sort of, you know, numbers advantage fights for a long duration amount of time. But you've got to start trying, because, you know, one of the great things I love about playing in my bracket, in the 5.4, 5.5k bracket, is that people don't give up because they understand how fickle Dota is. And what you end up running into are situations where you come back from games and you feel really good about yourself from coming back from these games that were pretty much unwinnable in a lot of ways. And I'm just going to fast forward this sort of to the end of this replay. But what you'll see is that the gold graph essentially goes crazy. We win a bunch of fights, we end up pushing down their bottom racks, and I think we went in 9 minutes from a game that was probably 10% winnable to taking 2 lanes of racks and essentially winning the game. And that's crazy. That's how quickly a Dota game can flip. And if we're to look at the net worth, it's now crazy in our advantage, and the experience graph is now crazy in our advantage as well. Like, Dota's a fun game because of that. It's very fickle, and that means when you're playing from behind, don't give up. Keep trying, and you'll be amazed that you can come back from some really ridiculous deficits. That's it from me. Thanks for watching, and I wish you the best.